Welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday, June 19 meeting of the Planning Commission. Can we have roll call, please?
Planning Commissioners Astorian,
Here.
Landrigan,
Here.
Lee, Sheets,
Here.
Chairperson Yesayan.
Here. We have a report regarding posting of the agenda, please.
The agenda for this the agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, June 12th, 2013 on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
Great. Can everyone please stand and repeat after me? Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. All right. Does anyone have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Do we need a roll call? Yes. All right. Roll call.
Planning Commissioners Astorian,
Yes.
Landrigan,
Yes.
Sheets,
Aye.
Chairperson Yesayan.
Aye. Oral communication. I do not have any cards. If anyone would like to speak, please fill out a card for the case you're here for or for oral communication. But we're going to be moving on. To the Alley Vacation case number 1707. This is under new business, item number 7, Planning Commission items. Is location a portion of the southeastern corner of Verdugo Road and Verdugo Boulevard. Do we have staff here for this?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, we have a proposed vacation, as you said, at the southeastern corner of Verdugo Road and Verdugo Boulevard. This is part of Engineering's Road and Honolulu Avenue intersection modifications project. Purpose of the intersection improvements are to improve the quality of the city's roadways, improve traffic flow, increase pedestrian safety, and reduce traffic speeds. And today you're being asked to make a finding of consistency or conformity, rather, with the city's general plan. And in terms of our review from staff's perspective, we looked at it in terms of what the circulation element provides, and this project would be consistent with the circulation element. The city's engineer is here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great. Questions? Mr. Sheets?
Nothing right now.
Ms. Landrigan?
No, I asked some questions. I think staff sent me some information, and my understanding is that the existing trees are to be protected in place and will be so noted on the plan.
Mr. Story?
I have no questions.
Okay. Do we have any plans for the area that we increase the sidewalk space? Is there any landscaping plan for that area directly in front of the retail merchants?
Chairperson Yesayan, yes, there are plans to improve the hardscape and landscaping in the area where we're vacating back to the property owners.
And what is the plan for that?
As far as the type of planting,
Yeah.
I refer to my...
Yes.
You want to post it so the rest of the commission...
The reason I bring it up is the last street vacation we did on San Fernando Road. I think it was Cypress.
Yes.
Was it Cypress?
Correct.
And what we filled in to that lot, where it was a dedicated right turn lane, and we made it increase the sidewalk space.
Correct.
I didn't know at first, but now that I look at it when it's all done, it's very nicely done. But I'm concerned of how the landscaping was done. And I think that site could have had a greater opportunity since we were doing it more enhanced landscaping. And I'm not sure if that could have been better through more cooperation with the parks and rec department, or how that process could be more enhanced?
Chairperson Yasayan, we do consult with the Parks Department because they have landscape architects on staff. And bear in mind that those landscaping elements that we implemented are to be maintained by the property owners. So there is a cost that goes along with enhanced landscaping that the property owners need to take on. So they had to be agreeable to that as well.
So is consider, I guess, minimal, because the maintenance of it was a concern.
That
Is
was
that what it
one
is?
consideration, yes.
Okay. And that extra sidewalk space now, does that belong to the city, or does it?
The city,
And also for this case, when this extra sidewalk space is increased, is that still city property, or is that going to be part of the?
but the underlying
properties.
fee title is always owned by the adjacent property owners, but the city maintains and operates the sidewalk. So for all intents and purposes, we do maintenance on the sidewalks.
Okay.
Perpetuity.
And who's responsible for landscaping it?
The installation of the landscaping, we hire contractors to perform. The city hires the contractors.
Maintenance?
The maintenance will be borne by the property owners.
And there's a agreement
Yes.
stating as such.
Correct.
But there appears to be no landscaping on the northeast corner. It's all new. All that area is now going to be hardscape, as it is now, but
Commissioner Landrigan will take a second look at the area and see if there are opportunities to increase the landscaping. You're referring to the northeast corner, right?
correct.
Right. We'll have to
Northeast
take a
corner.
closer look and see if there are any opportunities. And again, we have to install the latest up-to-date ADA curb ramps,
Mm-hmm.
in accordance, and they are quite robust in size nowadays. So,
They
and we
appear to
cannot.
be.
Yeah, that's part's nice.
I like the road diet. I'm really delighted because I take this route quite frequently. And there are interesting encounters with other cars when you would come around that. There's a huge grade difference. So that's going to be sloped quite a bit, isn't it?
Yes.
That'll be an interesting trek uphill for any wheelchair.
Of the wheelchair, there are standards that we need to meet, so we cannot exceed the ADA guidelines. by
Even
any
on a
means.
public right-of-way?
Even in the public right.
Even with the new prowl?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a part of, I think, the Commission's role is to see if this is consistent with the goals and objectives of the general plan, including the traffic circulation plan, and how it affects future land uses in the area. And right now, I know that the corner has a mechanic shop, but that use might change into a restaurant space or something else that could take more advantage of that. The way you have it planned right now, would it allow for a greater use of that area for outside seating potentially, since we are creating that space?
Chairperson Yasayan, actually, we had that in mind when we designed that corner, so that it provides hardscape area for outside sidewalk dining if the use changes in the future. Absolutely.
Okay. And can you explain why we still need the dedicated right turn there? And if we're doing this, why not just close it entirely and then have that even more extra space?
Chairperson Yasayan, the reason we need exclusive right turn is because of traffic, northbound traffic, so that when people try to make a right turn onto Honolulu or Verdugo, traffic won't back up on the northbound lanes. So there's always exclusive right turn lane, albeit it's more straight now, so it doesn't have that wide sweep, and people will slow down to be able to turn. But it's just to better circulation, vehicular circulation on northbound lanes.
Okay.
Does it have to do with the bus stop, too? Or would the bus because that bus then
Yeah,
swings
the bus,
over
right,
to
exactly.
go down Florencita.
Yes, that's another reason, yes.
So obviously the Cypress and San Fernando intersection was a lot lower. Is that is there a level of service
Yes,
you consider?
exactly, yes.
So it's an access to the, sorry, it's also major access to the freeway, which is during busy hours, a ton of cars want to go up there and turn right coming out of the neighborhoods just south of there. So
You're absolutely right, Commissioner Sheets, yes.
Mr. Stern?
So Cypress and San Fernando has a larger traffic count than does Verdugo and
I believe conversely, Verdugo and Honolulu,
has got a larger.
correct.
Is there new infrastructure being put into? Is a new storm drain?
No underground utility work is being proposed except for upgrading of the conduits for traffic signals.
Which are necessary to do the
You're
excavation.
not changing
To place
flow
this.
too much, right?
We are not changing the flow.
Okay. Well, I think this is a major improvement than from what it is right now because the configuration of that intersection is really odd and it's hard to get around. I think it would have been even more an enhancement if there was no dedicated right turn. And it's not really in the purview for us to understand, what the level of service is and to understand if, the decision is not, it requires a dedicated right turn or not. But I think this represents a big opportunity, this change in the intersection to do something really nice. And I can't really understand from the landscaping, the plan I'm looking at, exactly what it's going to look like. I know from what I saw in Cypress and San Fernando, engineeringly it was done very well. The landscape, I think it could have been something that was more enhanced. And I'm not sure if that goes through I know that didn't go through the design studio, but I think something like that should go through our design studio. And so
Chairperson Yesayan, there's no rule that says we cannot still do that. We're not done with the plans.
Okay.
The City Council hasn't authorized us to go out to bid yet. This is the first step on granting the vacation. We'll be more than happy to consult with our design studio. That's no problem.
okay. And was that last one done, collaborated with the design studio? The Cypress and San Fernando?
No. it
Okay.
wasn't.
But this one, you are confirming that you will work closely with the design studio?
Sure.
And is that okay, Mr. Foy?
He's certainly welcome to seek advice from our design studio, sure.
Okay.
Yes, I am. I think one of the things that would really be important is to consult the Greener Glendale plan that we came up with, which I think is really driving Mr. Yesayan's and my questions, because the heat island effect has an opportunity to be reduced here, and landscaping will do that, and I don't see that being done there, and that was a big concern for me. And in the future, EPA has quite a bit of money out there for doing low-impact development. And on the slope up here, where we have a huge amount of water moving down Montrose in the times when we have rain, it would have been a very cool opportunity to deal with that. So I would just encourage you to make a reference to that and start incorporating those into future improvements, because the opportunity of combining those funds is just really, really amazing, and I think we could really set some, the foothills we are right at the bottom of the foothill, so we get the majority of the runoff, and capturing it and keeping it in the city is a great goal.
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll keep that in mind for future project. We have received grants from Highway Safety Inspection Program, and they have a sunset timeline that we need to get this project out. But for sure in the future, we'll keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? Comments? If not, can we have a motion? Can we have a second?
Second.
Okay, can we have roll call?
Planning Commissioners Astorian,
Yes.
Landrigan,
Yes.
Lee,
Can I vote on this, even though I walked in the middle of it?
Did you read it?
Yes, I read it. I know the case. Aye.
Sheets,
Aye.
and Chairperson Yasayan.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Galani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galani.
Okay, next item. We have item B, use variance case number PVAR 1302080. Conditional use permit number PCUP 1302083 for alcoholic beverages. And item D, conditional use permit number PCUP 1302096 for banquet hall. Location is 1018 East Colorado Street. Staff, we have a staff report?
Yes,
Great.
Chair. Chair and members of the commission, we have a staff report which hopefully you have before you. I will just go through it very briefly. The exhibits are on the board behind you. On the board, you'll see on the upper left-hand corner a site plan. It's colored, shows the building footprint of the banquet facility. To the right of that, you'll see the actual floor plan. And below that, the lower, larger plan shows some storage areas that are in the upper floors. And then there's a small photograph showing the parking in the building and some zoning maps, a land use map. So very briefly, the applicant is requesting to continue operating the existing banquet hall and nightclub uses with alcohol sales in a C3 zone, which is facing Colorado Street, and an R2250 zone, which is located behind it. So in this particular property, we've had a commercial business development since 1924. It has straddled the two zones since that time. It wasn't the R2250 at that time, but it was still a multifamily residential zone. So this building has been, and this property has been developed since that period of time. It's located at the southwest corner of Colorado Street and Adams, and there are 35 parking spaces. There's so few parking spaces primarily because back in the time that the buildings were built in the 1920s, there were no parking standards. And the larger building, which is now being used as the banquet hall, was initially developed as a movie theater. It had some sort of an assembly type use, but they just didn't have the parking standards back in that day. The surrounding properties are commercial to the north across Colorado Street. To the south, you have your residential that we discussed, which is the back side of this property, as well as the neighbor across from it and that street. I believe it's Elk to the south, that whole area. To the east of it, we have C3. To the west, we have C3. If you look also, we have a very long chronology. We tried to put it normally a little longer than we do for a lot of cases, but trying to show and use as a basis for our decision why we would approve or recommend approval of a use variance, which we don't normally do. But in this particular case, we've had commercial uses in a residential zone, and we've had restaurants with alcohol sales in this residential zone, going back certainly to 1975, and we've had a nightclub and restaurant and alcohol uses since 1981. So over 30 years, we've had these types of uses, which are considered high-intensity uses. A nightclub has the same parking standard as a banquet hall. Now, the last time this commission looked at this property and approved it was in 2010. It was for the same thing. And the reason, I believe you were, and the only reason they're back is because there was expiration dates. So they're back to get these reapproved. Now, they said they're not going to make any substantial changes, but the only, except for a couple, they're asking to extend the hours of the nightclub by 1 hour, and they're asking to eliminate a condition that this commission had added at the end of the hearing to add 100 off-site parking spaces. That's their only request. Other than that, the floor area remains the same. The building remains the same. So for staff, at this point, it's pretty much just a reviewing the findings, which we did in our analysis. But I would like to bring out that the staff is supporting continuing with the maintenance of the 100 off-site parking spaces. So we do support that. We don't have an issue with extending the nightclub hours by 1 hour which you'll see in your conditions there. It's 1 extra hour for the nightclub. And
You don't, I'm sorry, you don't support it
We do,
to extend it?
yes. Yes. But not removing the 100 parking spaces. We do support maintaining that.
And where are those 100 off-site?
Yes, those spaces are across the street and next door. If I can
Yes.
approach the board, sir. And so if you look here if we look here, here's our subject site. Here's our residential behind it. We got 35 spaces right here in this little corner. We have a parking lot right here. There's a portion of that.
That's an empty lot.
That is correct. And then across the street over here, we have the gymnasium. And in the gymnasium, we're doing a shared parking. And we did an analysis. We did a parking study. They submitted documentation. And it took a while for us to get through that, but we went through with them, came to agreements, and they wrote up. We tried, hopefully it's attached in your file, but we submitted to you each of the parking agreements, one for this site, for that site, as well as the valet service.
So the 100 space requirement, you came up from that study? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the 100 space came from this commission. That came about because the applicant at the time said they had lots of parking spaces right across the street. And so we followed up on it, the commission members followed up on it and said, well, let's go ahead and
Okay.
preserve that.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll continue. So staff feels that as far as the variance goes, so we're looking again at one variance. The variance is to allow the banquet hall, the let's just make it simpler. The variance is to allow the nightclub use in the multifamily zone and in the commercial zone, as well as alcohol for the nightclub. And the conditional use permits are to allow the banquet hall and alcohol sales in the commercial zone. So that's why it's kind of a little bit of confusion on that. But we feel that we can justify it here, and probably a large part is because we have a long history of this assembly type use with alcohol uses here. And so last time the board went through this with us, and we were just basically adding the banquet hall use to this existing use, and came up to approvals. So staff feels that we can again support the 4 findings for the variance. We feel that we can support the 4 findings for the banquet hall for the conditional use permit, and the 4 findings plus the additional findings for the alcohol use for the banquet hall. And that's a real brief overview. I can go into more detail if you wish. The applicant is here, and they can go through this with you as well. And we do have conditions. Each of your motions, a lot of motions. We have 3 cases. We have a motion to approve and deny each of the cases for your choice. You can approve or deny each one, so that makes 6 motions altogether.
Okay. We have questions?
Question.
Sandrigan.
Mr. Baxter, thank you for such a thorough response. The only question I have is I do not see trash enclosures. Is it, and I don't know, is the trash inside the building, or is it kept outside?
I thought there was...
If you can show me where it is, that's a concern I have, just because if it's in one of the parking places, at least I would like to know that. So, I don't know.
No,
maybe-
right offhand, I don't know, but it would not have changed from the last time. And I have to admit, I did not look at that particular area now. I can
But
go look while.
Maybe
while
what
the-
I will ask is that on conditional use E4, is that what I'm looking at here? That on page 5,
Page 5, yes.
that adequate parking, comma, trash, and loading facilities are or will be provided for the proposed use. And when the applicant comes up, maybe they can tell me where the trash is.
Yes, ma'am. That would, yes, I guarantee you they'll be able to tell you that.
Okay,
And I'll look as well right now.
okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions before we get to the applicant?
Mr. Baxter,
Yes, sir.
there was a figure of and I don't have the packet in front of me. There was a figure of 14,000, I believe 62 or 652 for the entire building.
Correct.
And then there was a reference made to a 6,200 and change square feet of viewing space.
That is
Can you
correct, sir.
explain to me what viewing space is?
Yes, sir. How do we calculate assembly parking? Well, we calculate it based on the area where people are going to be sitting.
Aha.
So, for instance, if I may approach the camera. So, when you're looking at this entire building, which also includes storage area here, and here's storage area here, and there's some storage area below, we could, on one hand, just calculate the whole building, but when people are there for the banquet or for a nightclub, they're not mingling around in the kitchen or in the bathrooms and the storage areas. They're right here in this assembly area. This is where they're seating and being entertained. And that is the viewing area, 6109.
6109.
That's correct.
So the required parking for the banquet hall is calculated on 6109.
That would be correct, sir.
Not on the kitchen, not on the storage.
No, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Again, what was the capacity?
Yes, now I have that, the occupancy load, that's listed here in our staff report as well.
See it, I just didn't.
And let's see if I can find it quick here for you. I wrote that down.
Oh, it's in here, I had it marked, but I
Yeah,
can't.
I got it marked too, sir. It's like 534.
Over 530, right. I do
It's
remember.
534. I've got it right. Here it is, sir. If you look on page 6, at the bottom of, under analysis, use variance, toward the bottom of the second paragraph, you'll see
I see it.
the
I have it
14,000.
circled here, okay.
That is from the fire department. I talked to them personally, and they gave me the number of 534 is their occupancy.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more question. This may be a global question.
Yes, sir.
So then, but we don't count the same type of occupancy load for a retail store.
No, we don't. Or restaurant. That is correct. Because okay, this is a fair question, so let's think about this. When you have a restaurant, it's one space for 100 square feet of floor area.
Not viewing area, but floor area.
That is correct. Versus for assembly, it's one for every 28 and a half spaces. So it's quite a bit more. Quite a
One
bit more.
being what?
Instead of 10 per 1,000, it's 28 and a half per 1,000. So if you did 14,000 square foot restaurant divided by 100, you get X number of spaces. But if you're going to go by assembly and you did 28, then all of a sudden it jumps it straight through the roof. Yes, sir?
Hey, Mr. Baxter, in your report you said the applicant is asking for to waive off the 100 parking spaces.
Right.
And you had not received any studies or any claims to support that.
That's
Have you received anything since then?
No, sir,
Okay.
not at this time.
All right, thanks.
Would it have made a difference?
Well, if there was any type of if they're claiming that and if they're submitting supporting documents,
It would have.
let's take a look at it.
It'd be worth looking at, even for staff, would have considered something, but we did not see anything at the time.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go with the applicant, Ms. Shorik Yepremian. And you have 15 minutes, and I believe the owner is not speaking.
If you have questions,
Okay.
he's here to
All
answer.
right, so you have 15 minutes between the two of you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, and staff. Shorik Gepremian Consulting. I'm here on behalf of the business owner, operator of Palladio, Mr. Avo Keshishian. We're doing one other thing I would like to highlight. This is a renewal application, CUP as well as use variance. Per my request early part of this year, we have asked the city to consolidate and submit one package. If you recall, 3 years ago in 2010, you only heard the use variance portion of the application. On the same day, that morning, the hearing officer heard the conditional use permit application, and each of the decisions had different expiration dates or term limits. So my suggestion to staff was to file everything at the same time, even though for the conditional use permit portion, we have until November 15 of this year. So we try to put it together as one submittal so that it's reviewed at the same time in front of one decision-making body.
Thank you for
And
doing
the
that,
expiration
so we don't have
date
to
is
do more.
consistent, both for the CUP and use variance. Just a little bit of background. I know Chris mentioned some of the details. I would like to thank staff working with us on this application as well. The existing building was constructed in 1924 as a theater, movie theater building. The building sits on two separate zones, C3, Commercial Service Zone fronting Colorado Street, and R2250 Medium Density Residential Zone at the back of the property. There are 35 on-site parking spaces in the back of the property access from Adams Street. The important fact to remember as you review this case today, that the existing building is a non-conforming building, built back in 1924. The use has been non-conforming. Since 1924, it's been used as assembly, banquet hall, nightclub, restaurant, service of alcoholic beverages. So it's been going on for decades. The number of parking spaces on site, it's non-conforming as well. So I would like to make that very clear, even though there were discretionary approvals in the past, various types of applications, CUP for alcohol, use variance for the uses in different zones. It has been non-conforming. None of the prior conditions or prior approvals required additional number of parking spaces except the 2010 decision that this commission had. As part of this review and submittal, we asked that 3 of the conditions be reconsidered, reviewed by this commission, and one other condition which I, after reading the staff report over the weekend and went over the condition, I would like to address that as well. Condition number 9 of this particular report that you have, which deals with the nightclub hours of operation, we're asking that 1 more hour is given, approved by this commission. Before it was 12 midnight, Friday, Saturday, we're asking until 1 a.m. And then Sunday and Thursdays, 12 midnight or 11 o'clock, we're asking for 12 midnight. Condition number 13. Condition number 13 has to do with the number of security guards. And this is something I noticed when I reviewed the staff report. The second portion of that condition, which says for the nightclub events, a minimum of 1 security guard shall be provided for every 20 patrons. Now, we're objecting to this condition for 2 reasons. Number 1, this is a new condition. This was not in your 2010 decision. And number 2, that the fact that my client operation has been very professional, very clean, very safe. We're wondering why this additional condition is imposed at this time. So we would like...
Which condition, again?
Condition number 13, the second portion, the second statement.
So you're currently at which one?
We're currently, the first statement, which is 1 security guard shall be provided for every 50 patrons. That was in your 2010
Yeah.
decision, which we were fine with.
Right.
and we have submitted security guard contracts along with but the new condition that's been added is the second sentence, which says for the nightclub events, additional security guard, which is 1 per 20. Basically, for 100 patrons, you will have 5 security guards. We think that's excessive in terms of numbers. And the reason that it was not in your 2010 decision, we would like to know the reasons why that's added at this point when there's no complaint or anything in the file in the police department or code enforcement neighborhood services. Condition number 37, which is the off-street parking requirement, which you added back in 2010. Again, as I said, this has been a non-conforming building, non-conforming use, non-conforming parking spaces. So we weren't sure where that 100 off-site parking space requirement came from, where in all of the prior applications, decisions, that was never a requirement. It was never a requirement by staff for Palladio to provide additional parking spaces. Based on the 2010 decision, my client did agree with the neighboring properties, and he does have a lease agreement, but something that I questioned as to the legitimacy, legality, and the reasons why 100 parking spaces are required, where they don't have to meet current code required number of parking spaces. Condition number 40 is the last condition where in our application package, we ask for a 10-year renewal time period. It has been the city's practice, planning department's practice, that when an application comes in first, they get a 3-year time limit. That's a typical time limit for renewals. The next time they come in, it's 5 years, 7 years, and then 10 years. So that has been the practice. If we go back to the 2000 decision, a CUP, which was not Palladio, the prior operator, they had a 5-year time limit. When Palladio applied a conditional use permit in 2006, they had a 7-year time limit, which took that approval to February 9th of 2013. But in 2010, they had to come back and file for a CUP again and a use variance. That's when you heard the use variance application in 2010 in October, and the expiration was February 9th of 2013 to make it consistent with the 2006 decision. I hope I didn't confuse that. So that was the only reason they were given 3 years. And staff can correct me if I'm wrong. But the decision letters indicate that timeline as well. So we believe they had the 7 years in 2006, and I believe the next logical term limit is 10 years. So we are respectfully requesting that they get a 10-year time limit as well, especially with the fact that they got the 7 years in 2006, especially the fact that they have been operating very professionally, safe, clean, very responsible since 2006. For the last 3 years, the police department, neighborhood services had no complaints filed. They have security officers, they have cameras both inside the building and outside the building. They monitor the events very closely. We hope that this commission approves the renewals, both the CUP and the use variance applications, and hopefully you rethink about the conditions that I have highlighted. So I will conclude, and if you have any questions, I'm here, as well as the business operator.
Was that last condition you talked about, was that condition number 40?
Condition number 40, which
Make
says...
it from 5 to 10 years?
Staff is proposing 5, but in 2006, they had 7 years
Okay.
time limit. So we are proposing 10-year.
So
from
why from
today's-
7 to 10?
Because that's the
That's staff's, 5 years is staff's proposal.
Do 5 years.
Right, and we think the fact that they had 7 years last time,
Okay.
so the standard process has been 3, 5, 7, and 10.
Okay.
Especially with the fact that they have been operating an excellent business.
We have questions? Ms. Landrigan.
Ms. Shaprapian, thank you so much. I think you neglected something in your presentation, and one of them is that you are claiming that previously to the 2010, there were no requirements for parking spaces. Previous to 2010, it was not a banquet hall, and it was not operating as a nightclub. It was actually operating as a banquet hall, so it was in here to resolve that discrepancy. And that's why this commission at that time required parking for a banquet hall. And so I think it's a little disingenuous not to mention that the previous use was totally different and had no requirement. Also, this use, even though it precedes the two land uses, would not be, I mean, it would be great if you wanted to do a zone change here. It would make it a lot easier. You would not have to do a use variance, which is an odd animal in the first place for us to consider, and makes it hard on you because you do have to keep coming back. Those are issues that I think are pretty important in the manner in which we're dealing with this, but I also think that it's pretty clear why the 100 parking spaces were requested. And I think that it was because of the change of use from a nightclub to a banquet hall, and that is what is required in our code. So even though you had a nonconforming use, you changed it. That nonconforming use no longer carries forward and could have been made into a whole other kind of application. So I just wanted to have that dialogue with you.
I think staff can correct me. It has been used as banquet for the last several years, and the owner's also here to testify. They have submitted documents in that regard. They have been operating as a nightclub, even prior uses, so it's been continuing on, maybe not recognized in prior applications because it wasn't allowed use as part of the restaurant. It didn't become an issue until the banquet hall regulations have changed a few years ago.
Mr. Lee, sorry.
I just want to piggyback on to Commissioner Landrigan's comments. I think the fact that you did not get any complaints from the neighbors, and when the city went out to actually issue some or request findings to issue some special permits, residential permits around the area, they didn't get any. I think it's testimonial to the fact that the requirement of those 100 additional parking spaces around the area had actually resolved any concerns with the parking issues. So I just want to ditto Ms. Landrigan's comments about the parking situation here.
Sheets.
I'll tag onto that because I was here, and I remember going through the process, and the whole, all the requests have been done well. The location has a great history with all of the activities that have occurred there, but I do remember that an additional reason for the parking was, one, it became a banquet hall, the capacity was large, and there was some question, and I don't think there was any good response to the fact that there would be valet parking, and we couldn't get anybody to tell us where those cars would be parked. So the fact that they had valet parking, for me, just left the question of where they're going to go and how many there are, and I don't see anything today, and I didn't hear or see anything then that led me to believe that we didn't require. I thought the 100 spaces was adequate. It was a good choice on our part. It wasn't overwhelming in our determination, and it was something that was offered by the tenant and seemed to be very appropriate. But there was a good reason, and I don't see anything right now that would make me think that those parking spaces aren't required.
Can I go over
Sure.
those numbers a little based on my review of the case? There are currently 35 on-site parking spaces. Now, valet service was a condition. Typically, with valet service, more cars can be parked. So typically, if we look at the on-site parking lot, it can easily accommodate 70 parking, right? That's what I got. The adjacent lot, which is immediately to the west, has 37. You should all have those parking layouts. With valet, they can also go up to 44. So that itself is 114 parking spaces. And World Gym lot right across is about 63 parking spaces. So that brings everything up to 177. I think that's one thing it raised my concern that if Palladio stopped operating and they lose their non-conforming right, if a new tenant comes in with the square footage they have, they'll be required to provide 175 parking spaces. And with Palladio being non-conforming ongoing business, they're almost required to comply under the new regulations as a new business, as a new operator. And to me, that's why I didn't know where that 100 parking spaces came from and what studies were done at the time to show that was the number to be conditioned.
I don't think there were any.
But
based on the
with
volume.
valet service, typically they can park more. But if they didn't have valet service, yes, I would have used 35. That's what they have.
Sandra?
Also, there were individuals who were in some of the apartments around there that did request that this parking was there because there was a fear that there would be parking in the neighborhood and it's already impacted. And I think we heard that, and we had people come and speak, and it was a valid concern. I mean, we have been there. It's very well maintained. I think the good relationship that exists right now could be impacted. I would think asking to remove 100 parking spaces and to give 10 years is not a renewal. That's a whole other condition that would have to be tried and made into truism before I would even consider making it more than 5 years. I don't think asking those two things is a reasonable request of the commission, because if you did, you have no standing with the removal of those 100 parking spaces. And I might even be considered, if we did consider that, to go to 3 years. So I don't see it, I don't see anything on your part outside of a desire to not have those, and you know, the 100 parking spaces include that adjacent parking lot and the gym parking lot. So even your calculations indicate to me that, and you know, you can pack 500 plus folks in there. That's 250 people if they come together, minimum. That's, you know, and hopefully, and then some people will come more as carpools.
Or did they take their bikes too, right?
Right.
Can, we have
I also, if I may add to Commissioner Landrigan's, I asked the business operator to submit 1 year worth of number of guests and how many, you know, from May 2012 to April 2013. And we looked at Friday, Saturday, Sunday events, how many patrons they had, how many cars they had that was obtained from the valet service. And I have those numbers as well if you would like me to share those with you. The highest number of guests they had was on July 28th, Saturday. That was 400, and that occurred once in the entire year. The least number of guests, they had 200. So average, I averaged number of guests as 293 for the entire year. The average cars per month, 78. Average person in a car, 3.7. So those are the numbers I got from the business operator. I can submit those. It has my handwritten notes, but if you'd like to look at that, I have that available as well. So again, that's average for 1 year time period.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think she also had a question on this item number 13, where I think staff needs to address.
Right.
Yeah, but let's
Yeah, we,
done with her public hearing, and then we'll have some questions for the staff too.
And I believe Ms. Landrigan had a question about the trash enclosure.
I know that it's not supposed to be outside, right?
I don't know that requirement.
It's a,
It may be outside.
It
it
is,
says on number 29, which I think is a repeat, that adequate means be provided for the collection of solid waste generated at the site and that all items be collected. No trash container shall be stored in the R2250 zone or any parking driveway or landscaped areas. So they can't be stored outside of these two areas, is my understanding. And that, I didn't see them here. I just wanted to make sure that that condition was still being respected.
I can verify that.
Okay, thank you.
okay, let's go on to we have one speaker card, and then we'll go on to the other questions. I have Shireen Marcos.
Hi, my name is Shireen Marcos. I live in the neighborhood. So I have no problem with having the Palladium in the neighborhood. But I have only one concern since it's a nightclub, and I didn't know that before. I thought it's a new thing. They told me it's already there. So my problem is that, or my concern is that we used to have these banquets during the weekends only. Is it going to still be in during the weekends only? Because we have like parking problems and, sound pollutions and whatever. And since there are going to be alcohol and whatever, so this is not safe for kids. And I have two growing kids. But if it's going to be like what we're having right now, I don't mind. I don't have any problem with that. Since mostly they are organized, we have maybe a little bit of problem with the parking during the weekend because sometimes they park outside in our neighborhood in the street because their parking places are not enough. But still, it's not that big issue. But I want to make sure that during the week, the weekdays, is going to be a nightclub and having alcoholic people maybe drinking and going outside smoking or, it's a safe area and it's a high density area. So I'm concerned about that only. That's my only concern. But if it's going to be like what we're having right now, that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff want to answer?
Yes, ma'am. You noticed you can come up here. I gave you that little piece of paper
Yeah,
to show you what since you mentioned to me outside the nightclub was your main concern. So they are going to be open. The nightclub is all week. Technically, they have the ability to be open all week. But those hours of operation are Saturday, Sunday, as you can see.
Yeah, it's for one, from Friday till Saturday, it will be till 1, as they asked right now to extend that 1 hour. And during the week, it will be 12 instead of 11, as they asked for that 1 hour.
But that means that they can operate all those days during those hours if they wish.
And that's not different from what was
Not different
before.
than what has been before.
Yeah.
So the ability to operate doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to be operating, but they have the ability to do that.
Okay, but mostly it will be like what we're having right now, with the exception of that 1 hour.
Yes. Yeah,
Mostly
that's
it will be the same.
that's the only difference.
Okay,
I have a question.
yeah.
Give me some more detail on your comment about the parking.
Because their parking lot, it's totally filled during these banquets, and sometimes, or mostly, most of the time, they need to get their cars and park it in the street. So if you go outside to buy anything, whatever, and then you come back, you can't find a place in front of your house to park. So that's a problem. So normally during the weekends, even if any of our friends are visiting or whatever, we have to think twice before going out or coming in or whatever, that's the problem. So
I'm sorry. So you're saying that, I mean, they have ample parking lots right now. They have a contract with. You're saying that these valet parking personnel, they are actually parking cars on the streets?
yes, and their parking area or the parking lot, whatever, it's not enough. Because sometimes, not
You see the
always.
lots being used?
Yeah, mostly our street because we live like in front of that banquet. So mostly that street, he uses that part. So plus the plaza in front and plus the gym and whatever. It doesn't matter with me, but still, I'm talking about the street.
Thanks for speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Okay. We can allow a 5-minute rebuttal? 5-minute rebuttal from the applicant?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just wanted to specify, when we use the term nightclub, even though Palladio has the right to operate as a nightclub, it's very rare. I don't think they've even done it. It's mostly banquet, family, weddings, birthdays. It has sit-down dinners, so it's never your typical nightclub. And I would like to read the definition of a nightclub. It means any establishment that provides dancing involving a dance floor with 200 square feet of floor area or greater with music or live entertainment in conjunction with the sale, serving, or consumption of alcoholic beverage. A nightclub is open to the public and is not a banquet hall. So they never had organized a nightclub event where they would charge people, they come in, they pay, they walk in. They never had that organized event as a nightclub, but they have the right to be a nightclub as well.
Sure.
So then, based on the statement from the last person, then I can assume that if it was being used as a banquet hall, there's still a problem with parking in the neighborhood.
I can have the business owner address. There's no record in the file from the police department about complaints from the neighbors, from other businesses on site or off site. So I don't know where she lives directly, how far she is from the banquet, from Palladio, but I have the owner here if you want to find out if there has been one or two issues.
Well, I think her concern was if it's being done the way it is, I'm okay, reasonably okay with it.
Right.
If it's not going to get any worse, is what her concern is.
Right.
I don't know how we are going to address that, but she wasn't saying that she's having tremendous problems.
No. Basically, the operation will be as is, as it's been the last 3 years or
We hope.
6 years.
Thank you.
You want to bring it up?
Yeah. I think,
Are we closing the...
No.
yeah, I mean, she came up for rebuttal,
And
but
we have a new speaker card too, so we'll
but you have now responded to her question regarding the item number 13, so you've got to give her a chance to rebut.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. I had a conversation with the police department staff subsequent to their comments, and we were talking about the banquet hall nightclub, and it was just going through some of the a better understanding of the number of businesses selling alcohol and the amount of crime to make sure I understood it right. So when I entered it in the staff report, which you have here, that it was accurate. And I mentioned nightclub, and he says, nightclub? He says, I must have not been paying attention to nightclub. And so we started talking about it, and he was sort of sharing some of his concerns that nightclubs tend to hold a different level of concern with the police department because they're the police department gets involved with nightclubs a lot more than the other businesses because you have little control. People just show up and go, and you can have he was explaining to me there's some of the nightclubs tend to be a little rowdier than others. So that's when he came up with the number, and he suggested this one per 20. So I thought, okay, I'll put that in for nightclub only. Now, when the applicant had talked to me during some meetings that we had, he had mentioned they'd only had nightclub use a couple of times in the last couple of years. So I thought, okay, so it's not like it's an every time instance like the banquet hall. Because it's an unusual thing. So it's not a real high intensity. So maybe it might be just prudent, and it's not going to be as a difficult or hurdle for him to implement because it's only on a rare occasion. And on a rare occasion, it may be helpful to the city's police department to make sure that there's plenty of security. Then the applicant's representative just now, Mr. Premian, mentioned that they haven't really, I think, had no nightclub activities in the last couple of years. So whatever it is, it seems to be very little nightclub use. But at least we would be prepared with the condition should there be a nightclub use.
That's I'm sorry, Mr. Chang, but that what is being sought is the CUP for a nightclub as well.
No, sir. No, that's a use variance. Because technically, a nightclub's not allowed in either the residential zone or the commercial zone.
So in other words, there's a use variance being sought for a nightclub.
That is correct.
So then the requirement goes with what is sought. We can't just sit down here and second guess what that nightclub is going to be or not be or how many times it's going to operate.
That is correct. We can assume they'll operate every night, 7 days a week, from the hours of operation as stated.
So I guess, yeah, I have similar concerns. So when we approve this use variance, then they could actually operate as a nightclub
That's correct.
during the 65 days.
I mean, one caveat, and one of the reasons we're even recommending approval, so this is not all, I don't want to make it sound like it's all bad. They've been operating a nightclub since 1981. So just keep that in mind. This is not a new operation. This is not new to the neighborhood. This is something that is long historically established, and that's why in this situation,
No, I hear what you're saying, though. Because it's so rarely done, that the stricter requirement is not should not be as much of an issue. That's what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
So what was it before the nightclub requirement? It was the same. One security per 20.
No, sir. No. I'm sorry. The same is, let me back up. Here
It was one per 50.
That is correct. And then if you'll notice, number 13 says minimum one security guard shall be provided for every 50, 2 guards for 51 to 100, and 1 additional guard shall be employed for each 100 thereafter.
Okay.
So the threshold was a lot less.
Okay, I have one more speaker, Mr. Artak Davlatian.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Artak Davlatian. For the record, 213 North Orange in Glendale. My company owns the property directly across the street. We've had it under our management since probably 1999. So we have a good history of the area and the commercial uses and the parking situation prior to Palladio, and not actually prior to that. It was a true nightclub. It was called the Ornados. The property was dilapidated. We did have a lot of transients. The facilities were in dire need of renovations. This is going back from, let's say, 99, since we were in the area, directly involved with the community, all the way up to, I believe, 2006 is when the remodel and the ownership changed. And since the change, we had seen, prior to the change, an actual true nightclub. So you would have different bands. They had mariachi. They had different types of events. And we did, on occasion, have a lot of police activity, court enforcement. We did have individuals that were drunk that led it onto the streets, spillovers, and what have you not. And we also had a lot of issues with parking as well, since the property that we control as well is limited in parking. So it directly affected us and the type of retail uses that did come into the center, especially during the weekend, since most of the restaurants and whatnot are busy on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and at night. So it kind of coincided together, and that use actually produced larger requirements of parking, because then you have individuals that came in when I don't think there was families that used to come to the nightclub. So it was more of 1 and 2 people cars that used to come, and they basically had no valet. So we had a bigger issue or an issue at that point. But after the takeover and also the renovations, the area cleaned up, the economy was better, so there was better uses, there was better activity. As far as the parking is concerned now, we have different types of uses in our center now, and most of that use comes in Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, like I previously discussed. So we do have patrons that actually park on Colorado and park on Adams, and we do have spillover from our center, and also just the whole general area. It's very limited in parking since it was developed prior to the parking requirements. So, but again, I have not noticed within the past 5-6 years that valet directly parks the cars. It's more of the community and more of like, let's say, for example, the apartment buildings in the area, the actual guests of them park on the streets. Our clients, actually, our tenants' clients park on the streets. So, I mean, it's really more of that than actual valet attendant actually parking the street. Because I do talk to my tenants as well. So we don't have any issues of that per se. And I do notice that the parking lot adjacent to ours, which is the World Gym, gets utilized. And I do also notice, like, during certain hours, the Adams parking lot is usually empty for behind Palladio. I believe since, I guess, they had concerns with the neighbors, so they're kind of courteous in that sense. They do take the cars away and usually park it on the two streets that have ingress and egress off of Colorado. So I just wanted to bring that to attention as well. I think it's also critical to understand the whole dynamics of the area as opposed to them particularly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any other questions? Mr. Foy.
Yeah, I would just ask the commission to consider when you're talking about these security and crime issues that there was a time in Glendale, in my tenure here, when nightclubs were seen as actually preferable to banquet halls. The banquet halls were far more problematic. And I remember at the time the discussion was because sometimes in banquet halls there were just bottles of hard liquor on every table, and the patrons didn't even have to pay for their drinks, and that caused a lot of problems in and of itself. But then the banquet hall owners seemed to take to heart all the city's concerns and began to police themselves much better, and it just kind of, all their troubles with the law and behavior of their patrons greatly diminished. And I mean, I just think this comes down to the fact, which we all know, that it really depends upon the individual management of the place. And of course, it's kind of hard to write that into a code, but I think that is the truth that of how problem-free places run or not. Of course, you're setting conditions trying to anticipate future problems, but I think you can take into account the fact that this has been run pretty well, and a requirement of 1 security guard for every 20 patrons is not only kind of impossible to predict how many patrons you're going to have, but even 300 patrons would be 15 security guards, which is kind of a small army.
It is. Is that the standard, Mr. Foy?
That's what
I don't know that we really have a standard.
That's the question.
There is
It is
not.
a small army.
There is not.
Oh, there is no standard.
Well, I guess is there a standard, Tim, Mr. Foy?
I don't believe that there is any.
So this was
doesn't
this was
come up
input
often
from the
enough
police
that-
department as stated. Their thoughts. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to close the public hearing. We're going to enter deliberations. Who would like to go and discuss?
I'll go
Deliberate.
first.
Yes, Mr. Lee. Excuse me.
As far as the, I guess, on the subject of the security guards, the current operator has been doing a good job, and one of the neighbors came up and talked about the management of the parking situation as well. And, I think this additional requirement of the security guard on the item number 13 might be too too strict, and I think there's a economic hardship associated with this here. If he's been doing a good job with the existing security, I think that should remain, and that really should not change. So I'll go with the request of the applicant. As far as the parking
For
situation,
1 of 50? Is that what?
yeah. What was existing before, and then the make sure that what Ms. Landrigan suggested about the trash enclosure, that we get some sort of a agreement or some sort of a commitment from them that would be done. And as far as the parking space, if it remains with the off-site parking covenant, I'm good with that. And with that condition, I'm good with a 10-year CUP, giving the CUP for 10 years.
Mr. Sorian?
And I, to a great degree, I agree with Commissioner Lee here. But I do have a question in the meantime from staff. There was a reason why the police department has suggested that 1 per 220, and there is no standard, there is no ratio. Is there any way, Mr. Foy and Mr. Baxter and also the attorneys here, that since we know they have not had any issues, major issues, that we leave the security arrangement that is required by the condition status quo, and that if there are issues that rise to an alarming level, then can a condition be conditional, is the question.
Well, Mr.
Staff,
I
open up.
I was going to say, I can.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, it's possible to draft a performance-based condition, which I think is what you're looking for, and that is that to maintain the status quo would be appropriate, and then to develop a condition that would allow for, in the event that there were a reported event or a problem associated with insufficient security, that there be an agreement to meet with the planning director and develop a plan or agree to additional security guards under certain circumstances. If that might be an acceptable condition, it would be a performance-based condition that we could certainly work on a little bit while you're continuing your deliberation. We could present that to you to see if that's something that might work. But it's certainly possible to do that, yes.
And again, I don't want for this to be this needs to be a repeated occurrence before it rises to that level of kicking in a condition like that. That's my concern. So with that, I don't have an issue with the 10-year length of the CUP as well as the other the variance. As far as the parking is concerned, I tend to agree that we do need that 100 parking spaces in addition. That's just cost of business, and if you have that already, that's the reason why the neighborhood is not up in arms here today and complaining about the parking. Even the lady that your neighbor spoke rather well of you, and I think that is an important part to keep within your operations. The rest of it, I have no problems with. I can move with the approvals.
Mr. Sheets.
Okay. I basically agree with the statements made to the point. As far as the guards, I don't even know if there is a standard for the banquet hall either. I don't know if that's a standard, but I think the point is status quo seems to be an area that is working, and it seems to me that the additional statement from the police department is rather onerous, and so I would be okay with that. The parking, I'm seeing nothing. We did get a statement from somebody in the neighborhood, and with good intention, the other speaker came on and made a statement that trying to make the point that the excessive parking was not caused by the banquet hall, but he did state that there was no room to park. So, and I think if I think back to when we made that condition, that is the issue, and that's the thing we're trying to stay away from. And because of that, I can, depending on where we go with the 10 years versus 5 years, I could possibly be swayed, but I think because of what we're talking about now and the potential of business climate changing, other businesses in the area, I would tend to stay with 5. Just as a checkpoint. I mean, 5 years is a long period. You're consolidating all of these different variances and uses, and I agree with that, but what bothers me if we're doing 4 or 5 or 6 of them, and then we start making stipulations that are not standard-based, we get a mishmash that has to be re-explained next time. So I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but I'm leaning towards 5. Depending what everybody else feels, that's not a stumbling point for me. So the main thing for me is we need to maintain the parking condition, and for good reason.
Landrigan.
Thank you. I would like to thank Mr. Kazisian for being such a good neighbor and doing such a good job. I mean, we very rarely have neighbors come in and hardly complain about a banquet hall or a nightclub. So you must be doing something right, and thank you very much. I believe that we would really like to help you continue to do that, and that's some of the determinations we have here. But I just want to say that it's very rare that we have this kind of response, so you must be doing something well. I'm happy with the extension of the hours. I would support that. I agree with my colleagues that I think there needs to be, I hate to call it a penalty clause, but if it would seem to be that if the existing parking, the security issue on number 13 fails the police activity reports, then it would need to be readdressed, and those are conditions of approval that if they aren't maintained, they would have to be done. Come back and addressed by the Planning Commission or the Director of Planning or Community Development, whatever we call ourselves. I just want to make sure it wasn't a trick question to ask you if the trash was there, but I didn't see it, so I'm assuming it's inside. I just wanted to hear you say that. So that's a concern I have, just because it is in those 2 uses that do prohibit them being out. I'm actually going to be contrarian here. I really think 7 years might be something I would consider, only because I do agree that 10 years is an extremely long time in this economic environment. 7 existed before. 5 is more than 3. This is math. But if 7 existed before and it worked well, I would go with 7. I think going to 10 leapfrogging all the way to there. But, I think we can discuss that. But I just thought I'd throw that out for you all. Thank you very much.
Can I
Yes.
mention regarding the 5 and 7? The reason I'm advocating for 10 is that when somebody does a good job in the neighborhood, and then there has to be something that we need to reward the business people or whoever is contributing to that goodness. So
What if there's a change of ownership?
I think if there's a change of ownership, don't they lose? No, or
No, it goes with,
So what if there is a change of ownership in 7 years?
well, or 5 or 3.
or 5 or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really on.
But assuming that this pattern will continue, and then we have, I think, built in the safety net into the security issues and all that, and then we do have the parking spaces. So I don't think it's going to, amplify any problems or intensify any uses over there. So I guess coming back, I think something like this should be done, to encourage other people that who live in Glendale to to continue or to exercise good behavior and good business practices, then you are rewarded with a 10-year CUP lease. Oh, I mean CUP. Yeah.
Time frame.
Time period. So did I?
No,
No?
I think that's a very good reasoning.
Okay.
Well, I agree with everyone, what has been said here, and I do want to commend the work that you have done at the banquet. It does look very nice when you drive by Central Avenue every time. And I'm sorry, not Central, Colorado. I get these banquet halls confused. On Colorado. And I said it last time when you did come here, and we do need to encourage more kinds of businesses like that who do such an outstanding job to make their place look nice and keep it well maintained and minimize any kind of trouble that comes out of it. So I do agree with the requirement to have the 100 spaces. I think that is, like Mr. Astorian said, a cost of business and something that goes with your business model of being a really good community neighbor. With the other requests that you do have, I do agree, and I would be willing to grant those, including the 10 years as well. And the hour of operation as well, and I think the condition is already in there, so we wouldn't have to make a change. And
The additional security.
And the security, I am in favor of the performance marker that Mr. Astorian had keenly brought up. So if we can bring that, if we can make that as part of this, that would be great as well. With that said, if we can get a motion and with the conditions, and hopefully staff has a description, that would be great. Yes.
No, she was trying to make
Ms. Stotler?
We do have a draft condition that you may want to consider adding on to condition number 13. That would be, in the event that a pattern of security problems relating to and including but not limited to crimes, public intoxication, loitering, excess noise should occur as reported by the police department, the applicant, director of community development, and police chief shall meet to develop a plan for security operations to be implemented by the applicant.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Can you read loitering?
Yeah, we're looking at security problems related to and including but not limited to crimes, public intoxication, loitering, excess noise.
I have an issue with excess noise. Can we define that? Because that's something that you can't. We do have an ordinance, noise ordinance, anyways, right? So why don't we make a reference to our noise ordinance?
We can certainly do that.
Because excess noise for Mr. Sheets is quite something different than it is for me.
I'm sure.
It is?
Son at the age of 20.
Mr. Sheets?
Just a question, just because it was in the conditions before distinguishing nightclub and/or banquet hall use, do we need to state in there that this condition is for both? Does that make sense, or is that something, am I being overly?
Language wasn't there.
The performance requirement?
Yes.
No, I believe it's only for nightclub.
Nightclub only.
Yeah.
It's for nightclub use.
Yeah. Because the other one is one for.
It's
The other one is not an
It is
issue.
a standard.
Yeah.
That parking
That is a
requirement
standard.
is a
Yeah.
standard.
Very good. Thank you for the
Yes,
clarity.
Ms. Stotler?
We could be more specific and have it a noise in violation of section 8.36.
That would be Chapter 8.36 of the Glendale Municipal
Municipal
Code,
Code.
and that deals specifically with noise and noise regulation.
Great. That's good for me. Can I get a motion?
Mr.
There's
Chair,
several
Yes.
motions.
I'm sorry, can I just real quick, do you, the staff, we recognize that this performance-based condition is for the nightclub?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I wanted to make sure they
It's
understood.
not for the banquet hall.
Not for the banquet hall. Okay, all right, very good. So we have three motions.
I move all three motions.
Yes.
I know I can't do that. I just want to try it. Come on, you know?
Well, can we vote on all three at the same time?
No, we can't.
One by one.
But I move that upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits for the CUP located at 1018 East Colorado Street. And after conducting a public hearing on the matter, that we approve said conditional use permit, PCUP 1302096,
So she's going to go first.
with the changes as noted. That's for the conditional use permit,
Yeah.
And that would be for the banquet hall.
for the banquet hall. Thank you.
So are you seeking a second?
Uh-huh.
Well, let's get a second. I think we can vote on all three at the same time. So
Can we?
if we can move the other ones as well, that would be great. Do
Then
we
I-
need to move them individually?
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, it's at your discretion. You can move them together or individually if it's easier for purposes of understanding the modifications to each of those motions. You might want to take them separately, but if you could you can handle them all at the same time if that works for you.
Yeah. Unless someone has a problem,
Ms.
I think it would be good to move them all together.
Take it away, Ms. Landrigan.
Then read everything in record, Ms. Landrigan.
Well, then, indeed I will. I
Great.
move that upon review and consideration of materials and exhibits relative to the CUP, which is 1302083,
Alcoholic beverages.
which is alcohol and beverages, and all of the recommended changes to the conditions, that we hereby approve the CUP to allow alcohol sales, service, and consumption in the zones as indicated,
With your
with our,
amendment to that condition number 13.
with the amendment 13 changed, and we didn't, and the change to a 10-year.
Ms. Landrigan, you have to read into the record also use variance, PVAR, in the front, Exhibit 8.
But is that a I thought I already moved to that one. Is that,
You did the PCUP,
There's two
two
CUPs.
PCUPs,
oh,
Exhibit 8.
all right. So I have one more.
Yes.
Can I read yours? And I hereby move, upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits of the current record relative to variance case use, PVAR 1302080, located at 1018 East Colorado, that the Planning Commission hereby approves the use variance case to allow a banquet hall and nightclub with alcohol sales, services, and consumptions, with the changes to, well, there are no changes to that one, are there?
All the conditions for each application are the same, so if you're going to make a change, you
Okay.
need to change
So with
each one.
changes to number 13 on the security to have the performance standard, and the change to item number 40, which will allow a 10-year expiration, valid for a period of 10 years.
Great. Second.
Second.
Ms. Landrigan, outstanding job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Planning Commissioner Sheets.
Yes, can we have roll call, please?
Planning Commissioners Astorian,
Yes.
Landrigan,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Sheets,
Aye.
and Chairperson Yasayan.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations.
I would like to thank the Planning Commission for their continued support.
Of course. Thank you.
Individually or collectively?
Thank you very much.
Thank
job.
you. Okay, great. Can we have planning department updates? Sure. Thank you for coming.
so much. On Tuesday, the City Council did initiate a medical services zone. We're looking at creating a zone for the hospital, and that'll be brought to you shortly, but we did do an initiation with council for that.
Is that going to be called the pill bill?
Which one is this?
That's a good one. We're initiating a zone for the MS Medical Services Zone for Glendale Adventist Medical Center. They were the ones who brought it in. They applied for an application We initiated it because it actually includes properties that are not owned by the hospital, so that's the reason why we took it to council. And so the hearing will be before you on the next month or so.
Great.
The, pardon me, Mr. Chair, the MS zone, is it a zoning in addition to what already exists or replaces an existing zoning?
It would replace the existing zoning.
Ah, okay.
Great. Any other updates?
When is our next hearing?
Our next meeting would be on July 17th. We will not have one. The July 4th, obviously, is the holiday, so we were not going to have one that week. That's also going to be a dark evening for council. And so in keeping with the direction from the city manager, we will also be dark that week. And so our next one then will be on July 17th. At this point, we have an appeal scheduled, we have a tentative tract. We will also have an orientation that you had requested last time that just go over some of the basic rules and functions of the commission. So we will be doing that.
And we have two guests here. Who are they?
Get
Who
them
are
on
watching
record.
us on their iPhones.
They're on record.
One is my daughter, and the other is my daughter's friend.
Hey.
Waiting for me to finish up so we can go to a pool party. Thank you.
Well, we welcome you here, and we love having
Come
guests
back
here as well.
anytime.
Thanks for staying through the meeting.
You can fill out a card and speak next time.
Okay.
Great. We have comments from the commissioners? No?
I guess I would ask, I don't know if it's appropriate here, what the status is for the replacement of the commissioners? Or not, or lack thereof?
Sure. Let's see. Previous Tuesday, Councilmember Friedman made her nominations to the various commissions. Yesterday, at council, 3 more council members made their nominations. There's Councilmember Quintero has yet to make his nominations. I believe that the votes on those that have been nominated have been scheduled for next week.
Okay, I have one comment. We had the first task force meeting last Monday, and we discussed several big things, including one of the big things is changing the zoning use certificate and creating a business license or business certificate as in replace of it. So that was that idea was thrown out to the task force, and there was some discussion that happened. More of the discussion is going to continue next week. The other discussion was for the conditional use permits and how we can make some of it discretionary. We had just a little bit of a presentation of that in the first meeting, and we're going to have much more next meeting. And at some point, I'd like for us to have a presentation just to give an update to the commission as well. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, you'll get more than a presentation. You'll get a full staff report with recommendations to vote on.
Right. Just to keep the commission also apprised of what's going on would be, I think, helpful. In case one of us need to replace to each other, it would be good to keep us updated. Yeah.
We do intend to type up minutes for each meeting and place them online. So that's
Okay.
Oh, fabulous.
And if
An
that can
alternate way of
be
doing that.
sent out to the commissioners, that would be great too. And I guess there's several more meetings, and I'm looking forward to it. And I want to know who's coming to the next meeting, which
I
is
will
this
be there.
Monday. You'll be there?
Be there.
17th?
Yeah. What else? I wanted to commend staff for putting the task force meeting together. And I also want to commend the staff for all the work you do, including from all the demands that we give to you guys. So I appreciate it, and always going, bending over your backwards to try to accommodate us. So I appreciate that, and I think sometimes it doesn't, we don't take it, we may take it for granted, but I want to point that out. So thank you.
I don't take anything for granted, so.
Do we have any other comments?
I won't be here 17th, so.
You won't be here 17th.
Right.
Okay. We have a
You could
motion
call
to
in.
adjourn?
That's-
Great.
Adjourn.
Adjourn.